Hey guys, so in this video, I'll be walking you through the process of building a portfolio website using HTML and CSS. Now in this video, this is the design of the portfolio website that we are going to build. Now before we head over to VS Code to start writing the HTML and CSS needed for this design, I'd like to show you another version of this design, which is this. Now, this version is just a version that displays the box structure of the website. Now, in this video, you might hear me say box or you might hear me say container. Whenever or wherever you hear me say box or container, I am talking about the exact same thing. Now, this version of this design simply displays the box structure of the website that we are going to be building. And the reason why we have this version is so that we can easily visualize the container or the box structure of the website when we are building the markup of the website. So let's go into VS Code and start writing the HTML and the CSS needed for this website. Now we all know that the first thing to do is to create a project folder. So I would come here on my desktop and I would create a project folder called my portfolio website. Now you can create a project folder and call it whatever you want to call it. So the next thing to do is to bring out or is to launch Visual Studio Code and then open that project folder that I just created in Visual Studio Code. So I would go to my desktop and I would look for the project folder, which is this here, my portfolio website. Then I would click on select folder and the website or the project folder rather will be opened in VS Code. Now the next thing to do is to create our HTML file, and after that create our CSS file. Now let's go into our HTML file and generate a boilerplate. After generating the boilerplate, I would come here in the head of this HTML document and I'll change the title of this website from document to my portfolio website. Now, after that, I would like to link the CSS and the HTML file at this point. So I would come here. I would use the link element to do that. So I would create this link element, make sure the rel attribute is set to a value of style sheet. And for the href attribute, I would come in the double quotes there and I would point the browser to the location of my CSS file, just like that. Now, after doing that, I would want us to launch this website in the browser to see how it looks. I would use live server to do that. And as you can see here, in the browser, the website looks like this, right? It's empty. It's empty because we have nothing in the body yet. But I would want you to take a close look at the head or take a close look in the head of the website. You can see that in the head of the website, we have the title written as my portfolio website, which is what we did here. Very okay. But we have one element here in the head that is just blank for now. We have this round element there. Now that round element is supposed to be our image. It's supposed to be my picture or it's supposed to be my brand icon or my brand logo or whatever you want to put there. Just the same way you can see that in the head of the Figma's website here, you can see that before the title of the page, which is portfolio website, before that, you can see that the Figma logo is there, right? Now it's going to make more sense if in our own case, we are able to put our picture or our image there since we are building a portfolio website for ourselves. So the next thing to do is to go ahead and look for the image that we are going to place here. Now in my own case, I would go ahead and get my own image, right? So I would go to my downloads folder and here I have an image of myself. I would copy that. When I copy that, I would go to the project folder of my website, which is this. And in this project folder, we all know what to do. I would create an images subfolder, and in that images folder that I have just created, I would go in there and paste my image that I copied from the downloads folder. Now, the next thing to do is to rename this image to something meaningful. So I would just rename that image to Joseph, and that's that. So now I have been able to get the image that I want to put in the head of my website. And not only have I been able to get the image, I have been able to keep it in the project folder where it's supposed to stay. Now, the next thing to do is to come here in the head of the website here in HTML. I would come here and I will place that image here in the head. Now, how do we do that? I would use the link element to do that still, but this time around, the rel attribute, right, for the link element, the relationship attribute for the link element will have a value of icon, and I would have another attribute here called the type attribute, which is going to be set to images/x icon. And for the href attribute, I'm just going to point the browser to the location of the image that I want to put in the head. So I would come here, I would just point the browser to the location of this image, and that's that. So the next thing I would want to do before we start writing any code in the body of the website is to link this website to the CDN network of Font Awesome so that we can make use of Font Awesome icons in the process of building this website. So I would come here, I would go to font, I will go to the search bar and I'll type in Font Awesome CDN, then come here to this website. When I come here, I would scroll down and I would copy this link. I would copy that link by clicking on this icon here. When I click on that icon to copy that link, I would go in the head of the website and I would paste that link that I have copied from Font Awesome. Now, if I go back to my website in the browser, you'd see that, yes, actually, the image that I placed in the head is actually in the head. This makes more sense. After this, what am I going to do next? I would want us to go to the CSS file and set up as CSS. So how do we do that? First things first, I would want us to go to the Google Font platform and get a font family that we are going to be using from Google Fonts. Let's get the import link of that font family and let's paste it here in CSS. So I would come here, I would go to font.google.com, and when I get here, I'll be making use of the Bricolag grotesque fonts family. So I would search for that. This is the fonts family here. I would search for it. When I search for it, I would scroll down to regular 400 and I would select that. When I select that, I would click on the import button here, then copy the import link. When I copy the import link, I would go to the CSS file and I would paste the import link there. And after pasting the import link, the next thing I'll do here in CSS is to reset the page of my website. How do I do that? I would use the universal selector, and in the universal selector, I would set the margin of my page to 0, and I would also set the padding of my page to 0. And after that, I would set the box sizing property to a value of border box. Now, one final thing that I'll do here in the universal selector is to set the font family rule here so that that font family, which I have just imported from Google Fonts, will be the font family that will be used throughout my whole website. So I would come here, I would go back to the Google Font platform and I would copy the CSS rule for this font family that I have just selected in Google Fonts. This is the CSS rule here. I would copy it. When I copy it, I would come here in the universal selector and I would paste it. And that's it. Now, what I have just done here is me simply saying that let this font family called Bricolag Grotesque be the font family that will be used universally throughout my website. So that's the font family for my website. So how do we confirm that all we have been doing so far is working very well? How do we confirm that our CSS file is properly linked with our HTML file? And how do we confirm that the font family will actually be Bricolag Grotesque? We can confirm that by coming here in HTML and just creating a h1 element for testing. So I would say this is for testing, right? When I save that and I go back to the browser, you'd see that, yes, we have the H1 text here saying this is for testing, and the H1 text is making use of the Bricolag Grotesque fonts family. So this makes sense, right? So far we have been able to set up our HTML file and our CSS file. So what we have to do next is to commence the building of our portfolio website. So let's go back to our sketch, to our design. Let's come here. Looking at this sketch or looking at this design, what do we have to build first? Of course, we have to build the first container here, or the first box. Now, this first container is a section, right? It signifies a section. This is a section here. Now, you can call that section whatever you want to call it. In my own case, I'll be calling that section the hero section. So we have to create this section first. So I would come here in the body, I would create that section using the section tags, right? So here I have just created a section. Now we need to actually give that section a class name that we can use to differentiate it from other sections. So to do that, I would come here and I would give this section a class name called hero section. And that's that. That section has been created. Now, if you look at the section, you'd see that inside the section, we have another container. Now, this container is the container that contains all the content in this section, right? So let's go ahead to create this container that will contain and house all of these content. So let's go inside this hero section here in HTML and let's create that container. Now we all know how to create containers in HTML. It's very easy. Just use your div tags, right? So I have my div tag or my div container created here, and this container is this one here. So we need to give this container a class name because we can't just allow it stay like this. So I would come here, I would give it a class name, and I would call this hero content container. Now, the reason why it's called the hero content container is because it is a container in the hero section that contains all the actual content of the hero section. Right now, if you look at this container, the hero content container, you would realize that there are 3 other containers inside of it, and these 3 containers directly contain things, right? There is this first container here that contains, hi, my name is Joseph. There is this other container here that contains this description text, and there is this other container here that contains this button. So let's stay inside this hero content container and let's create these 3 containers and their content, starting with this one here that says, hi, my name is Joseph. So let's create the container for this text. I would stay inside the hero content container and I would create another container. Now, this container would have a class name. I would want to give this container a class name, and I would want that class name to be called hero title container, just signifying that this is the container that contains the title in the hero section, right? So I would call the container, or I would give that container a class name called hero title container. And inside that container, what do we have? Let's create some space here. Now, inside the hero title container, what do we have? Of course, we just have a H1 text that says, hi, my name is Joseph. So let's come here and let's create that H1 text element inside the hero title container, and let's write, hi, my name is Joseph. That's fine. So we are done with this container. The next container to create inside the hero content container is this container here that contains this description text. So let us go inside the hero content container and create this second container. Now, do not mix these things up. For us to create this container here, for us to create this container, we have to go inside the hero content container. Do not make the mistake of creating this container inside this container, right? Do not make the mistake of doing that. So make sure you stay inside the hero content container to create this container. And how do you ensure that in HTML? Always come here and look at the beginning, or look at the opening tag of the hero content container and trace the closing div tag of the hero content container. So now that we know that this is the opening tag and this is the closing tag of the hero content container, we are going to try our best to stay directly inside that container to create the container that we want to create. So now I have been able to create this container. Now I would want us to give this container a class name. So I would give this container a class name, which is going to be hero description container. And inside that container, what do we have? We just have a description text here that says I am a UI designer and so on and so forth. So I would copy that description text, come here, use a paragraph element for that, and I would paste that. That's fine. So as you can see, we have been able to create these two containers in the hero content container. So let's go ahead to create this container here that just contains this button which says send me an email. So let's still ensure that we are in the hero content container when we want to create this container that will contain the button. So make sure you are able to still identify the opening div tag of the hero content container and the closing div tag, and make sure you are staying directly inside the hero content container. So I would stay here and I would create a new container, and this container will be the container that will contain this button, right? So I would come here, I would give this container a class name, and I would call this hero button container, and I would stay inside that container to just create my button. Now, so far we all know that to create button elements, all you just have to do is use the opening button and the closing button tag, right? But we are going to do this differently here, because we need this button to be an actionable button whereby if a user clicks on it, it's going to take the user, it's going to link the user to their email client or to their email app, so that they can directly or they can instantly send you an email. So we are going to create the button and wrap the button or nest the button in an anchor element, so that we can use that anchor element to build that behavior that will make it possible for the user to directly send you an email when they click on the send me an email button. So what we are going to do is we are going to come here, first of all, create an anchor element, right? Now just create the anchor element and don't do anything else. Now stay in between the opening anchor tag and the closing anchor tag. Stay in between there and create your button element now. Now in between the opening button and the closing button tag, that's where you would put that button text that says send me an email. Very fine. Now let's configure this button to make it possible that when a user clicks on the button, it's going to launch the email app in the user's computer, right? If I come here now and I click on the button, nothing happens, right? You can see when I click on the button, nothing happens. So let's make sure that when the user clicks on the button, it's going to activate their email app. So I would come here and I'll do that. The way to do that is to come here in the href attribute of the anchor element that is wrapping the button, or that is nesting the button. I would come here in this href attribute, and in the double quotation mark of the href attribute, I would write mail to, M-A-I-L-T-O. Now, when I write mail to, I would put a colon sign there. And after I put that colon sign, I will then write my email address. Now, in your own case, write your own email address. So I would say learn@devdesignhq.com, and this is my email address. And that's all I have to do. So if I come here now and I go to my website, if I click on the send me an email button, you can see that that is going to trigger the email app in my computer, and I'll be able to send an email instantly to learn@devdesignhq.com. So that's a better experience that you can put in your portfolio website to ensure that whoever wants to send you an email is able to send you an email without having to copy your email from your website and then paste it in their email app. So what we have here is the hero section. We are done with the hero section. We are done with the HTML of the hero section. So let's move on to the next section here, which is going to be this section where we showcase the project that we have worked on, right? So I would come here and I would create a new section for that. And I would give this section a class name so that I can differentiate it from other sections. So I would give it a class name called project section. Projects section. I would save that. Before we proceed, I would like us to pass some comment, right? So that we can easily know where our sections start, right? So this is my project section. Now here I would pass in another comment and I would say hero section. So that's my hero section. So in the project section, what do we do? Let's go back to our design. Let's see what we have. We have just created the project section. This is the project section, this very big container that is selected currently. That signifies the project section. So in the project section, what do we have? We have two containers. We have two children containers in the project section. What are the two children containers? We have this container and this container. So we are going to create these two children containers in the project section, starting with this one here. So let's go in the project section here in HTML and let's create that first container. We have just created the container. Now this container needs to have a class name because we can't just leave it like that. So I would give this container a class name called project caption container, just because it is the container that is containing the caption of this project section, right? It says my recent project. So for that reason, I would call that container, or I would give that container a class name, which is project caption container. Let's come here. Let's give this container that class name. I would say project caption container, and that's fine. Now, inside this project caption container, what do we have? We have this text that says my recent project. So I would go there inside the project caption container and I would create a H1 element that I would use to write that caption. And it's going to be in all caps. So my recent project, just like that. And we are good to go. So we have created the project section, and inside the project section, we have just created one container that contains the caption of the project section. So let's look at what we have next. We have this other container next. Now, this container is the container that contains the cards that are showcasing the project that we have worked on, right? That's what this container is containing. The container is containing all the cards that will be showcasing all the projects that we have worked on. So we are going to create that container now. And I would want us to give that container a class name. Let's give this container a class name, which is going to be projects container, right? Now that container has been created. Now inside the container, what do we have? We have the cards that are showcasing the project that we have worked on. And as you can see, these cards are actually the same structure, right? They are of the same structure. So if I am able to create one of these cards, all I just have to do is duplicate them into 3 other places so I can have 4 cards in total. That way I can use the 4 cards to display my best 4 projects. So I don't need to create the 4 cards from scratch, one after another. All I just have to do is create one, then duplicate to have the others. So let's look at this one here that we are going to be creating. Right, as you can see, this card here, this is the card that I have just selected. That card is a container of its own. It's a container on its own, right? It's a container, right? The card itself is a container because the card is housing, the card is containing all of these that you can see in the card. So the card itself is a container. So we need to create a container that will be used as the card. So how do we do that? Let's stay inside the project container, which we have created, and let's create this card. This container that will be used as the card. So now I have created the container that I will be using as my card. But it's not going to make sense if I leave it like this. I have to come here and give it a class name that I can use to differentiate it from other containers. So I would give it a class name, which is going to be project card. You can call that whatever you want to call it. I would call this container project card because this is the container that will be serving as the card used to display my project. Now I would want you to take a close look at the card. Look inside the card and you'd see that in the card, the first thing we have is a section that has a background image. Now that background image will be a thumbnail of the project that you are trying to showcase here, right? That's what's going to be the background image here in your own case. Now this background image will be staying inside a container. So in essence, what we need here is we need to create a container that will have a background image. So let's go into our card. Take note, all of this is still inside the card that we just created, right? So let's go inside our card and let's create this container that will have a background image, right? So I would come here inside the card. This is the card. I would stay inside the card and I will create a container here, and this container will be that container that will use the thumbnail of the project as a background image. So all I'll just do here is create the container, give it a class name that's going to be project, let's say project image container, and that's all. Now take note, the image will be a background image. The image will not be inserted in this container here in HTML. It won't be inserted into the container using HTML. It's going to be a background image. And the way we apply the background image property on a container is to use the background image property in CSS. So let's come here and let's look at the next container to build. The next container to build is this container here. Right, this container is still inside the card, yeah? Don't forget that. So we are going to build this container here. Right? Now, this container is a container that contains all the actual content of this card. As you can see, it is the container that contains everything that makes real meaning, right, when you look at this card. So I would call that container, or I would stay inside the card. Take note, we have to still stay inside the card, right? I would stay inside the card and I would create the container that will be used for that. I would create the container and I would give it a class name of project card, let's say project card content container. Now, the reason I'm giving it this class name is because this is the container that will contain all the actual content in our project card. So now that that container has been created, what do we need to do next? We need to create the two children of this container. The two children of this container are this container here and this container. So let's start by creating this child first at the top. So let's stay inside this container that we just created and let's create that child that is at the top. Let's create a container that will be used for that child at the top. So I have just created it and I will want to give it a name. I would want to give this a class name, not a name, rather just a class name. I would want to give this a class name and I would want the class name of this container that I have just created to be project title and description container, just because this container contains the title of the project and the description of the project. So I would want us to give this container a name, which is, or a class name, which is going to be project title and description container. So let's come here, let's give it a class name. Let's say project title and description container. Very okay. Now we have just created this container. Now, inside this container that we have just created, what the next element or the next container to create? The next container to create is this container that directly contains the Solar AI text, which is the title of our project. So I would come here, I would stay inside this container, the project title and description container. I would stay inside there, and I would create this container that will contain Solar AI. So let's create this container. Let's give this container a class name of project title container. Now we are giving this container a class name called project title container because this is the container that will contain the project title. So now that we know that this is the container that will contain the project title, let's stay inside the container and create the project title itself. So I would come here and I would say Solar AI, and that's it. Right. So now we have created that. So let's come here. Let's still stay inside the project title and description container, which is this. Let's still stay here and let's create this container that will contain the description of the project. So I would come here. I would stay inside the project title and description container. Please take note of that. Do not mistakenly stay inside another container. Right. I would stay inside that container and I will create this container. So I have just created that container and I would give it a class name, which is going to be project description container. And just to mention, these class names are not a rule, right? You can name your classes whatever you want to name them, right? But I am just trying to make sure that we use class names that can make us understand what we are doing easily. So I would come here and in this project description container, what we have here is the description of the project. So I would copy this description. I would go inside that container. I would put a paragraph element and I would paste this there. Let's make sure this is staying where it's supposed to stay. So I have just created that. So what I have done is I have created this container and I have copied and pasted the text content that is supposed to be in that container, and that's fine. So if you go back to our card, you'd see that what we have to create next is this container here, right? This container that is selected, and that container is directly, take note, this container is directly inside the project card content container. So let's stay inside the project card content container. Let's stay inside there and let's create this container. So I would come here and I would create that. Now, when I create that, I would definitely give this a class name. So I would give this, or I would give this container a class name, and the class name I would like to give this container should be project tags and link container, just because this container will be containing the tags attached to the project and the link that will take the viewer to Behance or to wherever you want them to see the full case study, right? So I'll be giving this container a class name called project tags and link container. So I would come here, I'll say project tags and link container, and I would look at what we have to create next. Now, inside this project tag and link container, we have this container here that contains these two tags, which we are going to create using buttons, right? And we have this container here containing see full case study and this icon here. So first of all, let's create this container here that contains the tags. So I would go into the project tags and link container and I would create this container. So let's come in here. Let's create that container. Let's give it a class name and let's call that project tags container. Now, this container that I have just created is this one that is selected. Now, inside this container, what do we have? We have two buttons. The buttons won't be clickable actually. I would create the first button that says UI UX designer, and I would create the second button that says interaction designer. Right now, what these tags are doing here is simple. These tags are just telling your viewers the role you played in the execution of this project. Right, that's just it. Now I have created that container, this container that contains those two tags. So let's come here and let's create this container that will contain the see full case study link and the icon that we have there. So let's come here. Take note, we have to still stay inside the project tags and link container. This new container that we are about to create is not inside this container. So do not stay inside this container that has the two buttons to create this container. As you can see here in the sketch, this container is not staying inside this container. Rather, this container is directly staying inside this container here, which is the project tags and link container. So let's go to the project tags and link container. This is the opening div tag for that container, and this is the closing div tag. Let's stay inside it and let's create a new container. Now, this container will be used for this. So let's stay inside the container now and let's create a see full case study link and an icon. So I would come here. I would create an anchor element. And in the anchor element, I would just have see full. Let's have a paragraph element there. Wrapped. Let's have a paragraph element nested in the anchor element. Then let's say see full case study. And in this container, the second element that we have will be this icon here. And of course, we know that the icon also has to be clickable, right? So for the fact that the icon has to be clickable, we need to wrap the icon inside an anchor element, right? So that's the anchor element for the icon. And I would come here in between the anchor elements, in between the opening and the closing anchor element. I would stay there and I would put the icon from Font Awesome. So I would be making use of Font Awesome classes here. So I would say FA solid, and I would say FA arrow upright from square. FA arrow, I think that's it, upright from square, right? And that's it. Now if I come here, you see we have the see full case study text appearing as a link and the icon also appearing as a link. Now you might be wondering, why did we not put these buttons in their individual containers? You might be wondering why we didn't do that. Now we didn't do that because it's not going to hurt for us to just have the two buttons stay inside one container. If you want to put them in their individual containers, it's still fine, it's going to work. But it's not going to hurt if we just put these buttons together in one container. Since we just want to have only two buttons there, right? It's going to be cool if we just have them in one container. Same for this also. The reason why we are not putting the see full case study text link and the icon in their independent containers is because it's not going to hurt also if we just put both of them in one container. Now, this is a rare case. I'm not saying you should go about building like this, right? I'm just saying that these are just rare cases where we can get away with not putting these items individually in their own containers, right? So that's why we are building this way. Now, in your own case, if you decide that you want to put this button in its own individual container and this button in its own individual container, that's still fine. It's not going to break, right? It's still going to work just fine. Now, as you can see here, in our sketch here, we are done with the card. So all we just need to do is to duplicate the card into 3 other places for us to have 4 cards in total that will be used to showcase 4 of our best projects. Now let's come down here and see what we have to build next. The next thing to build is another section, the publications section, right? So we are going to build that section next. So let's go to HTML. Let's come here. Let's create a new section. this section is going to have a class name, which is going to be called publication section. Now let's add a comment here so that we can easily identify this section, publication section, and that's fine. Now in the publication section, what do we have? You'd see that in the publication section, we have two children containers directly. We have two children containers directly in the publication section. We have this and we have this. So let's go ahead and let's build these two containers. So I would stay in the publication section. And I would create a container. Now this container will be this one here. I would create a container there and I would give it a class name. Now the class name will be publication caption container. Publication caption container. And in that publication caption container, all I'm going to have there is a text that says my publications. So I would come in here inside that publication caption container and I would put in a h1 element there that just says my publications in all caps. And that's that. Now let's see what we have to create next in the publication section. The next thing to create is this container. Now this container will be containing the cards that are showcasing my publications. So let's create this container. So this container will be created. Take note, the container is created directly in the publication section. Please do not do the mistake of creating this container in the publication caption container. This is an independent container, as you can see here. This container is not inside this container. So when you are creating it in HTML, do not make the mistake of creating this inside this. So I would come here. This is the container here, and I would give it a class name. I would call that publications container. Publications container. The reason I'm calling this publications container is because this is the container that directly contains the cards that will be showcasing my publications. So I have just created that container. Now in the publications container, what do we have? We have the publication card. We have this card here. We have this card. Now these cards are just there to showcase my publications. And as usual, I won't create the two cards from scratch. All I'm going to do is just create one, then duplicate it to have the second. So I would stay inside the publications container. I would stay inside the publications container and I would create that publication card container. Remember, the card itself is a container. The card itself is a container because the card contains all of these information. So I have just created the container that will be used for the card. Now this container needs to have a class name and I'm going to call that publication card. Very easy, right? Now in the publication card, what do we have? We have, let's zoom in the publication card, we have two children containers, this and this. So in the publication card, we have to create this container first. Right now, this container is containing the publication title and the publication description. So let's create this card that is containing the publication title and the publication description. So let's go in the card, stay in the publication card, and create that container that will contain the publication title and the publication description. Let's give it a class name. We have just created the container. Let's give it a class name that's going to be publication title and publication title and description. Let's see, publication title and description container. It's a container that contains the publication title and the description of the publication, right? So I would give it a class name, which is publication title and description container. And that's fine. Now in that container, what do we have? We have this container that contains the publication title and this container that contains the publication description. So let's stay in this container and create this container first. So I would stay here and I would create that container. I would give it a class name, which is going to be publication title container. That's all. And in the publication title container, what do we have? We just have the publication title that says Solar AI, and that's it. So I have created this. So I would still stay here in the publication title and description container. I would stay here and I would create this container that will contain the publication description. So I would come here. Take note. I am in the publication title and description container. Take note, always identify the opening div and the closing div of the container you are trying to create something in. So I would stay there and I would create another container. This container that I have just created is this container here. And I would give it a class name, which is going to be publication description container, just like that. And after that, I would go inside the publication description container to see what we have there. You can see all we have here is just a text, a description text. So I would copy it. I would come here in HTML, use a paragraph element, and I would paste that. So you can see I have just created the publication description container and I have placed the publication description text content in the container. And that's all. So what we have done so far is we have created this container here that has this and this. Now we need to create this container that contains the read publication text link. Now, first things first, ask yourself, where is this container located? As you can see, this container is a child of the publication card. So I would come here, I would trace the publication card. This is the opening div tag of the publication card, and this is the closing div tag of the publication card. So I would make sure that I am directly in the publication card before I create the container that will contain read publication. So now that I am directly in the publication card, I would create that container that will contain that read publication text link. So I would create the container, give it a class name of publication link container. Now in this publication link container, what do I want to have? I just want to have that text link that says read publication. Right? So I would come here. I would have this text link here that says read publication. And that's all. Now, when you are building this in your own case, right, this href attribute will have or will take the link to your publication. Right? You'd copy the link of your publication and you'd paste it here. Then do not forget to put the target attribute set to _blank so that when a reader or when a viewer of your portfolio clicks on the read publication text link, the link to the article or to the publication will be opened in a new tab. That's going to be a better user experience for users using their desktop. Now, if you come here to this project card, you'd see that in the project card, we have this container that contains see full case study and the icon in front of see full case study. Now, this is where you would also paste the link to your portfolio or to your project. Maybe it could be your Notion link, could be your Behance link, could be your Figma link. All you have to do is to copy that link and paste it here in the href attributes, right? And copy that same link and paste it here in the double quote of this href attribute. And also do not forget to set your target attribute to a value of _blank so that if somebody clicks on see full case study, the case study or the place where you kept the case study will be opened in a new tab. Do not forget also to set target to _blank here so that if a viewer of your portfolio clicks on that arrow icon in front of see full case study, the case study page will be opened in a new tab in their browser, right? In a new tab. So that's that. Now, do not forget these little details. So what we have here is the HTML for this portfolio website. That's what we have here. We have the HTML written for this portfolio website. Now, the next thing we are going to do is to write the CSS for this portfolio website. But before we do that, let's look at what we have so far. So you can see that the markup is ready. We have all the contents that we are going to need for the complete development of this portfolio website, right? So we are going to come back in the next part of this video to start writing the CSS for this portfolio website. So in this part of the video, we are going to write the CSS for our portfolio website. And the way we write CSS is simple. We write CSS for our HTML element line after line. That's how we write CSS. So that makes it very easy to understand and easy to implement. So I would come here in a CSS file and I would start by writing CSS for the first element here in our HTML file, which is the section element for the hero section. So I would start by writing the CSS for this. Now let's take this hero section into CSS using its class name. I would copy the class name, come here, and I would put it here in CSS. And we all know that whenever you are designing a section or whenever you want to write CSS for a section, the first thing to do is to define the width for the section. And the width for sections are best when they are 100%. And the height is going to be set to auto. Now, the next thing we are going to do is we are going to look at the section in the browser and look at the section in Figma. Now you can see that in this hero section in Figma, one thing that's very pronounced is the fact that the elements in the section are not touching the edges of the section. There is this inner space in the section between the edges of the section and the content in the section. Now that inner space can be created using the padding property. So basically what we are going to do is to pad the section so that these contents in the section do not touch the edges of the section. So I would come here, I would stay in the CSS styling block of the hero section, and I would set the padding property for this section to 4 rem for the top, 8 rem for the right, 4 rem for the bottom, and 8 rem for the left. When I save that and I come back here, you would see that we have been able to achieve that padding space. Now you can see that the content in the hero section are not touching the edges of the hero section, and that's cool. Now the next thing we are going to do is we are going to apply a background color for this section. Now the background color that we are going to apply will be this background color that we have here in Figma. So let's look at the color code. It's 180C15, right? So I would come here in CSS and I would apply a background color for this section, and that background color will be 180C15, just like that. Now the next thing I would want us to work on will be to have a blue color for the text, right? So that we can at least see the text while we are building, because currently as the background color is set to something which is dark, the text is also dark, so we are unable to see the text from the background color. So just for the sake of building, I would come here and I would set the color property to blue so that we can just see this for the meantime while we are building, and that's fine. Now, what do we do next? I would want us to set a display property for this section. Now, the reason I want us to set a display property for this section is just so that we define the direction of the elements in the section, right? We only have one element in the section. If you look at the sketch, we only have one element in the section, like one child element in the section. So I want to define the direction that this element will be positioned to, right? I want to define the direction that this element will be arranged with. So I would activate flexbox on this hero section, and I will set flex direction. I would set flex direction to row, and I would set justify content to start. Now, setting the justify content to start, as we all know, simply means that I am aligning the elements in this section to the starting point of the main axis, which is the row axis in this case. And the starting point of the row axis is the left. So I would set the align items property to a value of center. Now, we all know that the align items property is used to align elements on the cross axis in a flex container. And in this hero section, in this container currently, which is the hero section, the cross axis is the column axis. So me setting this to align item center is me simply saying that the element in this hero section should be aligned to the center of the column axis, which is my cross axis. Right, so that's that for this section. That's that. So what we are going to do next is to design, or is to write CSS for this container here. We are done with this section, so let's write CSS for this container. This container is the hero content container. Let's select that container into CSS using its class name. And I would come here, and the hero content container, of course, I would set the width to 100%. Now, the reason I'm setting the width to 100% is so that this hero content container will be 100% as wide as its parent container, which is the hero section. Now, being 100% wide does not mean that the hero container will touch the edge of the hero section. No. It's not going to touch the edge of the hero section because the hero section has a padding space applied on it. So that padding space will ensure that even though this is set to 100% width, the padding space won't allow it to touch the edge, right? But nevertheless, we are going to still set the width to 100% so that it's going to be very wide as it can get. It's going to be really, really wide, right? So I would set the width to 100% and I would set the height to auto. And one thing I would want us to do is to define the direction in which we are going to arrange these three containers in this container here, right? This container has 3 containers. So I would want us to define the direction in which we are going to arrange these 3 containers inside this container. And the easiest way to do that is to activate flexbox and set the flex direction to column, because we want to arrange the elements in that container on the column axis. We want to arrange them vertically. So I would set the flex direction to column, and I would set justify content to start. We all know what justify content does, yeah? It aligns elements on the main axis. So I would set the align items property to start, and that's going to be fine. So let's save that. Let's come here and let's see what we have. Not looking bad, right? Not looking bad. So the next thing I would want us to design would be this next element here, which is the hero title container element. This is the container that's containing this hero text that says, "My name is Joseph." So let's come here. Let's bring it into CSS using its class name. And all we just have to do for containers like this is to set the width to fit content and set the height to auto. And that's all we have to do for the designing of containers like this, right? And when I say containers like this, I mean containers that directly contain just one text element, or just a button element, or just an anchor element, right? Containers like this are best when you set their width to fit content. So we are going to then design the H1 text, which is inside this hero title container, right? We need to design it and make it look better. So we are going to bring that H1 text, right, into CSS by asking CSS to go into the hero title container where that H1 text is in, and bring the H1 text into CSS. So this is us saying, hey, CSS, go into the hero title container. When you get there, grab the H1 text inside that container and bring it here so that we can set the color of that H1 text to white, and we can also set the font size to 1.6 rem, and I would want us to set the letter spacing to 0.05 rem. Save that, come back here, and you can see we have this. Now this looks better than what we had before now, and that's cool. Now what's the next element to design? Remember, we are designing this element by element to make it easy. The next element to design is going to be the hero description container. So I would copy that class name, take it into CSS, and the hero description container does nothing but contain this hero description text. That's all the hero description container does, right? So I would come here, I would set the width of that container to fit content, and I would set the height to auto. After that, I would come here and I will want us to design the paragraph element, which is containing the description text itself. I would want us to design the paragraph element, which is inside the hero description container. So this is all I'll do. I'll tell CSS that, hey CSS, go inside the hero description container, then grab that paragraph element in there, bring it into CSS so that we can set the color of that paragraph element or that paragraph text to B2, 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 and we can set the line height. We can set the line height to 1.4 rem. Now let's save that and let's see what we have. Okay, this looks better. This looks better. Now there is a little problem that we have here, and I would want all of us to put our heads together to solve this. Now, if you look at this paragraph text, right, you can see that it spreads across the whole container till the end of the container here, then it goes to a new line. Now, that's not how it's designed here in Figma. You can see that in Figma, the paragraph text, which is used for the description, right, of the designer, is not spreading till or to the end of this container. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that this text does not go beyond a certain width. So the easiest way to do that is to just reduce the width, right, of the container that the text is in. When we reduce the width of the container that the text is in, the text will not see any opportunity to be wider than its container. So ask yourself, what's the container of this paragraph text? This is the container here of the paragraph text. It's called the hero description container. So here in CSS, we can decide to set the width of this hero description container to 50%. So this is us saying that this container, which contains the paragraph text, which is the description text, should be 50% of its parent container, which is this whole container here, right? This hero content container. So we want this description container to be 50% wide as its parent. So when I do that, when I write 50% there and I save, if I go back to the browser, you would see that yes, the container will actually become 50% wide as its parent container, forcing the paragraph text inside of it to shrink, right, into 3 lines. So the paragraph text inside of it will not see any reason to be wider than its parent. So this is how we have forcefully made the paragraph text, the description text, to stop somewhere here. And that's fine. So what we are going to do next, or what we are going to design next, will be the hero button container. That's the container containing the button in our hero section. So I'll bring that container into CSS. And as usual, I would set the width for that container to fit content, because it's just going to contain a button element. And I would set the height to auto. Now, what's the next element to design? The next element here to design is the anchor element, right? That is wrapping, or that is nesting the button element. So for the anchor element, there is one thing I'm going to do. I'm just going to select all the anchor elements in my HTML file, and I would take out the text decoration property on all of them. I would say text decoration none, right? And that's good. Now, After the anchor element, what do we have next? We have the button, right? So let's take this button into CSS, but let's take it into CSS this way. Let's ask CSS to come here into the hero button container and select this button element in this hero button container. Let's ask CSS to do that. So let's say, hey CSS, go into the hero button container, and in that container, grab that button element that is there and bring it into CSS so that we can set the background color to, let's see the background color here. We can set the background color to 371A38. So let's come here. Let's say 371A38. And we can also set the padding of that button to 1 rem for the top, 1.5 rem for the right, 1 rem for the bottom, and 1.5 rem for the left. And we also want to set the color of that button, like the color of the text on that button, to white. Then we are also telling CSS that for that button, we want to apply a border property. We want to add a stroke to that button. So we are going to set the border of that button to be 1px solid. Then for the color of the stroke, we are going to come here and see the color that we used here in Figma. It's D9416F, right? So I would come here, I would say D9416F, right? And that's the stroke color or the border color for the button. Then we still want to tell CSS that, hey CSS, for this button here, we want the border radius of this button to be set to 0.5 rem, and we want the outline property to be set to none. We don't want an outline property for that button. So if we come here, you'd see that we have the button properly designed. Now there is one thing I would want us to implement on this button, and that's going to be the cursor pointer effect. Now as you can see, when I hover on this button, my mouse cursor does not change, right? And that's not cool. So I would want a situation whereby when a user hovers on the button, their mouse cursor will change to that of a human finger. And the way to do that is to just set my cursor property to pointer. When I do that and I come back here, you'd see that my mouse cursor will change to that of a human finger. And now when I click on the button, it's going to launch my email app so that I can send this designer an email easily. Now, this is beginning to make more sense, right? Now, before we proceed, I would want us to look at this design that we have here already and note some little errors or some little things that we can do to improve the design. Now, one thing we can do to improve the design here is to increase the space between the elements in this section. And by the element, I mean we can increase the space between this and this, and then this and this. You can see that the three elements are very close to themselves, and that's not really cool. So how can we do that? Now, the easiest way to do this, right? The easiest way to increase the space between this and this is to go to this container, right? And apply the row gap space property on this container, right? Apply, this is just like you applying space between on an auto layout in Figma. When you apply space between on an auto layout in Figma, what happens? The space is created between the element in the auto layout, right? So it's just the same thing. So we are going to go to this container, and this container is called what? That container is called the hero content container. So we are going to go to that container and apply a row gap space. So this is the container here, hero content container. So we are going to come here and apply a row gap space of 0.6 rem. And when I come here, you see that yes, we have a better space in here now in this design, right? There's enough space between this, and this. Now, I know I haven't mentioned this, but the link to this Figma file will be in the description of this video, and any resource at all that you will need in the course of building your own portfolio will be in the description of this video. So let's keep going. So now we are done with the hero section. I think we are done with the hero section. Now I would want us to move on to the next section, which is the project section, right? So if you come here in HTML, you'd see that yes, we are done with the hero section because we have designed the hero button container and the hero button itself. So that's the end of the hero section. Now the next section here is the project section, and as we all know, we are going to take that section into CSS using its class name. So I would come here, I would bring that section into CSS with its class name, and as we all know, the first thing you have to do to a section is to set the width property to 100%, then set the height to auto. Now let's go to add design, and let's look at the section, the project section. You can see that in the design here, the content of the project section are not touching the edges of the project section. There is still this inner space that is created in the project section between the walls of the project section and the content in the project section. Now we can implement that spacing using padding. We can implement this spacing using padding. So let's come here. Let's stay in the styling block of the project section here, and let's set the padding for the project section to 2 rem for the top, 8 rem for the right, 5 rem for the bottom, and 8 rem for the left. Now, the reason why I am keeping the left and the right set to 8 rem is so that these contents can have a consistent spacing, right? This content in the project section can maintain a consistent spacing as the content in the hero section. As you can see, the spacing is consistent, right? That's why I have the left and the right set to 8 rem so that I can achieve that. Now, after I set the padding in the project section, I would like to set the background color. I'd like to set the background color in this project section to the same background color that we used in the hero section, that 180 C15. If I come here now, you see we have this. Now after this, what I would like to do next is I would like to set the color of all the text in this project section to blue, so that we can at least see what we are working on first before we change the colors to their actual colors, which is white or something gray. So I would set this to blue, and when I set that to blue, you'd see that all the text in the project section will be blue. Now we can see them clearly and work with them effectively, right? So let's come here. Let's see the next thing to do. Now the next thing to do in this section will be to decide the direction that the children in this section will be arranged in, right? Now you can see that this section has 2 children, this and this. Now how do we want them to be arranged? In what direction do we want them to be arranged? Now in our own case, we want these 2 children to be arranged vertically. So we have to state that. And the way to do that is to come here in the project section and tell the project section that, hey, project section, please arrange your children vertically. The way to do that is to activate Flexbox and set flex direction to column. So that's going to mean that the project section will have its children arranged vertically. After that, we are going to justify content. To start, remember, justify content is for the main axis, and we will align items on the cross axis to center, just like this. So when I come here, you would see that we have this for now. Yes, this is going to be fixed very soon. So, but we have this. Everything is working just fine. Now, the next thing I would want us to do is to look at the next element to design. We are done with designing the project section. Now, the next element to design is this container here, which is the project caption container. So I'll bring this here into CSS with its class name. That's the project caption container. Now, how wide do I want this container to be? I want this container to be 100% wide as its parent container, which is the project section. So I would come here and I would set the width of this container to 100%, and I would set the height to auto, and that's all I would design, or that's all I would implement for that container. Now let's see how the container looks now. You can see it looks very okay, right? You can see my recent project text is now aligned to the left. Now what do we do next? We want to design the H1 text that says my recent project. So we are just going to tell CSS that, hey CSS, go into this container and grab the H1 element that is there. So I'd say CSS, go into this container and grab the H1 element that is there. Grab it and bring it into CSS so that we can change the color of that text to, let's change it to this color here. Let's see that color in Figma. It's FF429D, right? So I would come here and I would say CSS, change the color of that H1 text to FF429D, right? And set the font size for that text to 1.1 rem. Then also set the font weight to 600, and we are also going to tell CSS to set the letter spacing for that H1 text to 0.05 rem. Save that, come back here, and you'd see that we have this, and we can work with that. Now, what's the next element to design? The next element to design in CSS here is the projects container. So let's take this project container into CSS, right? And let's see how we can design this project container. Now, before you design the project container, go back to your design and study how the project container is structured. Now, this is the project container here. Now, the project container is the container that contains the cards that are showcasing the project that we have worked on. Now, this project container will have a width of 100% because we want this project container to be as wide as the project section. Although it's not going to touch the edges of the project section because there is padding applied on the project section. But we want the project container to be as wide, to be 100% wide as the project section. So I would come here and I would set the width for this project container to 100%, and I would set the height to auto. Then the next thing to do is to tell the project container how we want the element in it to be arranged. In which direction do we want the element in this project container to be arranged? First of all, ask yourself, what are the elements in the project container? The elements are the cards. This card, this card, this card. These are the elements in the project container. So how do we want them to be arranged? Now, in this case, we want them to be arranged horizontally from left to right. So the first card should be placed on the left, the next on the right. Then when the next one is to be placed, it comes here to a new line and starts from the left also, and the next goes to the right. So we want the direction of arrangement to be horizontal. So how do we do that? How do we define that for the project container? It's very easy. We are going to activate Flexbox. When we activate Flexbox, we are going to set the flex direction to row and then set the justify content. Let's set the justify content to start for now, and let's set the align items to start also, and let's leave it at this for now. We are going to come back to this particular styling block, I think, to tweak one or two things when we have the full design ready. So that's that for the project container. Now, what's in the project container? The project card. That's the next thing to design. So for the project card, I would come here, bring it into CSS with its class name, and I would first of all set the width of the project card. Now ask yourself, how wide should each project card be? Now I want each project card to be wide enough to the point where it can actually reserve space for another project card to stay beside it. So in essence, I would like to divide the project's container into two equal halves, or into two, so that one project card can stay on the left and one can stay on the right. So for that reason, I would tell my project card to be 48% wide. remember the project container is 100% wide, right? So I'll tell the project card, I'll tell each project card to be 48% wide, knowing fully well that if a card is 48% wide, it can stay here and still reserve another space for another card that will be 48% wide, because 48 plus 48 will give us 96, right? So that's enough space. That's enough space for another card, right? That's us not going above 100%. So we are able to put two 48% wide cards in a 100% wide space. So let's come here and let's set the width of my project card to 48%, and let's set the height to auto. Now for the project card, we need to also decide the direction of the element in the project card. As you can see in the card, we have different elements. We have this section here that contains a background image, and we have this section here that contains all of these. And these two containers, the background image container and this container, the both of them are arranged vertically in the design. So we have to tell CSS to do that. So what we are going to do is we are going to come here in the project card, we are going to activate flexbox. When we activate flexbox, we are going to set the flex direction to column, so that all those elements, or so that these two containers in the card, these two children containers in the card, will be arranged vertically. Now, after we set the flex direction to column, we are going to set the justify content to start, and we are going to set the align items also to start, and that's going to be it. Now, I would want us to come here and see what we have. Now you can see that we are beginning to make progress, right? We are beginning to make progress, but there is one little problem we have with spacing. The problem we have with spacing is that if you look at this design, you'd see that in the project section, there is this little space between my recent project, the container of my recent project, and this container of the project. There is this little space there, but in the design, there is no space. So we have to implement that space. And how do we have to implement that space, or how do we implement it? To implement that space, we are just going to go to the project section and apply a row gap space of, let's say, 1 rem. So let's go to the project section, right? Let's go to the project section and apply a row gap of 1 rem. When we do that and we go back to our website, you would see that yes, that row gap has been added. Now this space is adequate, this space is enough, right? And let's keep going. So what do we have to design next? What do we have to design next? Let's go to HTML and see. The next thing to design is this project image container. Now, this container is that container in our website that will contain a background image, which is going to serve as the thumbnail of the project you are showcasing there, right? So let's take this container's class name into CSS and let's design that container. Now, study this container in Figma. This container will be as wide as the card, right? That's going to be the number one thing to do. We need to ensure that the container will be as wide as the card. So I would set the width of the container to 100%. Let it be 100% as wide as its parent, which is the project card. Then for the height, let's set the height to auto. Now let's go to our website and let's see if there is any change. Now you can see that there is no change here, and the reason why there is no change is because the container does not have anything in it, and when a container does not have any element in it, that container is sizeless and the container won't be visible. But we need that container to be visible, because if the container is not visible, then it cannot display the background image that we will put in it. So the container has to be visible before it can display the background image that will be put in it. So how do we make the container visible? To make the container visible is easy, right? We are not going to use the height property to make it visible. We are just going to apply a padding property, right? We are going to apply a padding property. So I would come here, I would set a padding property of 5 rem. When I set that padding property of 5 rem, what CSS will do is CSS will go into that container and apply an inner space of 5 rem. That's going to make the container to become bigger, which is going to also make it visible. As you can see, we have this space that's been created here. This space is that container. This space is the space of that container. It is the space that we have created with that padding of 5 rem. So now that the container is visible, even though it's blank, now that it is visible, we can now add a background image. Right? So I would come here and I would add a background image. But first of all, where is the background image that we are going to use? Let's go to our computer. Let's look for a background image here, or let's look for an image that we can use as a background image. Let's take it to our project folder and let's paste it in the images folder. This is the image that I'll be using as the background image in my own case. In your own case, remember that background image will be the thumbnail of the project that you are showcasing. And please take time to design that image very well and make sure you design it in a way that it's going to blend with the background of the whole website. Right, so I would come here, I would rename this to BG image, right? And that's fine. So I would come back here and I would say, okay, for this project image container that I want to add the background image to, how do we do that? Of course, we know how to do that. I would use the background image property and the URL function to say, okay, go to the images folder and pick the BG image in the images folder and use that as the background image for this container. If you come here, you would see that in the browser, yes, the image is placed there, but it's not positioned properly. The image has to be configured. The positioning of the image has to be configured properly. And how do we do that in CSS? Very easy. We just have to set the background position to center, then set the background size. We need to set the background size to, let's set this to cover. Then we need to set the background repeat to no repeat, and I think that's all. And if we come here, you see that yes, the image is now properly placed as a background image in that container, right? So one thing I would want us to do next is to set a border radius on that container so that the background image will have those curved corners that will make it look cooler. So I would set the border radius to 1 rem. Let's see how it looks. And that's okay. That's okay. So there we have added a background image to this container here, right? So the container has gotten its background image. Now, what's the next element to design? It's the project card content container. Let's select that and let's go into CSS. Let's place it there. Now, the project card content container is this container here. Project card content. This is the container we are talking about, right? This is the container that contains the actual content of the actual content in the project card. So this container will be 100% wide as the card also. So I would set the width to 100% and I would set the height to auto also. And after I do that, I would set the display property to flex because we need to decide how these two children in this container will be arranged. As you can see, the container has two children, right? This child and this child. These two containers are its children. We need to decide how they will be arranged. We need to decide the direction in which they will be arranged. So I would come here to do that. I would activate Flexbox and I would set the flex direction to column, and after I do that, I would then justify content and align items. So I would justify content to start, and I would align items also to start, and I would save that. Now when I come here, you see we have this, right? But we have one problem here. We have a spacing problem also. Now the spacing problem is that these two children are not supposed to be very close to themselves like this. We want a space between the two children in this container that we are designing currently. So we want to create a row gap space between those two children. So I would come here and I would set a row gap space of 1 rem between those two children, and I would save that. Let's see what we have. Okay, and yes, that row gap space makes it look better now. Now, one other thing I would want us to do is to increase the height of this card. Let's increase the height from the bottom. Let's increase the height of this card from the bottom, right? And the way to do that is to use the padding bottom property. Let's increase the padding at the bottom of this card. That way it's going to in turn increase the height of the card. So I would say padding bottom, and the padding bottom will be 2 rem. When I save that, you see that yes, the height of the card will be increased. Now, what do we do next? The next thing to do will be to design the next element. That's the next thing to do, right? And the next element here is the project title and description container. Project title and description container. Let's select the class name and let's take it into CSS. Project title and description container. Now, this is that container here. This is the container that contains the project title and the project description. So we are trying to design this container, and this container also has to be as wide as the card. So I would set the width of this container to 100%. I would set the height to auto, right? And since that container contains two children, the container contains two children, we need to set the direction in which those two children will be arranged in. And the way to do that is to activate flexbox and set flex direction to column. And after that, I would set the justify content to start, and I would set the align items to start. Then after that, I would come here and I would look at what we have so far. You can see that the two children are there, but I would still want us to increase the spacing between the two children in that container, the spacing between Solar AI and the description. I would want us to increase the spacing between them so that they don't stay too close to themselves. Now, the way to do that is to go to this container containing the two of them and set a row gap. So I would stay here in the project title and description container, which is this container. This is the project title and description container. I would stay here in this container and I would apply a row gap space of 0.5 rem. When I do that, you would see that there'll be a little space that's been added there, and that's okay. That's okay. Now, let's still work on the spacing between our elements. If you look at this card, right, you'd see that there is no space between the container that has a background image and Solar AI and this section that has all of this content. You can see Solar AI is very close to that container. So over here, what I want is I want some space between the container containing the background image and this container containing all this content. So the way I can apply that space, right, I can apply a row gap space between this container and this container. I can apply a row gap space here. And the way I can do that is to go to the card itself. I have to go to the project card itself and apply a row gap space of 0.5 rem. That way, a row gap space will be created between this part of the card, this child of the card, and this child of the card. So when I apply a row gap space on the card, it is the two children in the card that the row gap space will be applied between. So what's going to happen now in our website is that you'd see that there is going to be a space, a little row gap space created between this container that has a background image and this container that contains all of this. That space will be created there. And that's better. That's better, right? So what do we have to design next? After the project title and description container, the next thing to design here will be the project title container. And the project title container is just containing the title of the project, which is Solar AI. So for such containers, we know what to do. For such containers, you just set the width to fit content and you set the height to auto. That's all. Right? That's all you do for such containers. Now, for such containers also, we don't need to set any other thing, right? I believe such containers are the easiest containers to work with. Right? Always know that when I say such containers, I mean containers that directly contain a short text or directly contains a button or a text link. Such containers are mostly best when you set their width to fit content. So inside this container, we have this H1 element that is that has a text content set to Solar AI. So we want to design this H1 text here. So we are going to ask CSS to go into the project title container and grab the H1 text that is there. Grab it, bring it into CSS so we can set the color of the H1 text to white, and so that we can set the font size to 1.2 rem, and also so that we can set the font weight to 600. CSS will do that. And as you can see, we have this, right? Looking better. Now, what we have to do next is this. We have to design the next element as quickly as possible. So the next element to design is the project description container. That container contains the description of our project. So we are going to take that container into CSS using its class name, and we are going to set the width to fit content and set the height to auto. And that's all we need to do for that container. That's all we need for that container. Now, if you go inside that container, you would see that that container has a paragraph text. So we want to design this paragraph text. And the way to do that is to tell CSS to come to this container and grab the paragraph text in the container. So I would come here. I'll tell CSS that, hey, CSS, go into the project description container and grab that paragraph element out of that container and then bring it here so that we can set the color of the paragraph element or the paragraph text to B2 and then set the font size to 1.2 rem. Let's set it to 1.1 rem, just like that. That's fine. And you can see we have this. CSS has been able to do that for us. So what do we need to do next? Let's go back to HTML and find out. Now you can see that the next element to design in HTML is the project tags and link container. So let's select that project tags and link container. Let's take it into CSS and let's get ready to design it. But before we design it, let's look at it in our sketch. So in our sketch, this is the project tags and link container. This is the container that contains our tags and a full case study link. So what do we want to do to this container? First things first, we want this container to be as 100% as wide as the card that it is staying in. So I would come here, I would set the width to 100% and I would set the height to auto. Right? And after I set the height to auto, the next thing I would want to do is to define the direction in which the elements in this container will be arranged. What are the elements or what are the children in this container? This and this. These two containers are the children in this container, and I want the both of them to be arranged vertically. So to do that is very easy. I would come here and I would activate Flexbox. I would say display set to flex, and I would set my flex direction to column. Now, after I set my flex direction to column, of course, I have to justify content. I would justify my content to start, and I will align my items also to start. Now, when I come here and I look at the website, you can see we have this, not looking bad. But we need to increase the spacing. We need to improve the spacing in this container that contains these elements. Now, if you look at these elements, you'd see that the two buttons and the see full case study link, they are very close to themselves. If you come here, that's not the case. This container that contains the two buttons and the see full case study link, they are not close to themselves like this. There is a space that exists between the two containers that contains this group of elements. So the way we can implement this space is to set a row gap on this project tags and link container. So we are going to come here in the project tags and link container. We are going to apply a row gap of 1 rem. When we do that, you would see that in the website, a gap will be, or a space will be created here between this container that contains these two buttons and this container that contains these links. So this is better than you having them stay together, right? This is better. So after that, after designing the project tags and link container, what's the next thing to design? The next thing to design, or the next element here to design, is the project tags container. That's the container that contains the two buttons, right, that we are using as our project tags. So the project tags container will have its width set to fit content. It's containing two buttons. You can actually set the width to 100%. That's still fine. You can set the width of these two tags, or these two buttons, to 100%. But since they are buttons, I'll just set the width of their container, the project tags container. I would set the width to fit content, and I would set the height to auto. Then the next thing I would want to do is to set my display property. Reason is because we have two elements in this container, and we have to decide, we have to define the direction in which these two elements will be arranged, right? So I have to come here and do that using Flexbox. So I would stay in the project tags container, and I would activate Flexbox, and I would set my flex direction to row, because I want the two buttons in this project tag container. I want the two buttons in this container to be arranged. This is the project tags container. I want the two buttons to be arranged horizontally, right? Now I have done that. They are now arranged horizontally. If you go to the website, you'd see that the both of them are arranged horizontally, but they are sticking to themselves. Now we need to create a space between the two buttons in this container. We need to define a space. But before we define that space, let us align items and justify content. So I would come here. Remember, the main axis is the row axis. So I would justify content to start, and I would align items on the cross axis to center. And after that, I would want us to set the column gap. The column gap space will be that space that will create, or will be the property that will create that space between the two buttons in this container. So I would set the column gap to 1 rem, save that, and let's see what we have. And as you can see, yes, that space has been created between the two buttons. And that's very, very cool. So what's the next element to design? The next element to design are the buttons, actually. The buttons are the next elements to design. So let's tell CSS that, hey, CSS, come inside this container and grab all the button elements in this container into CSS so that we can design them. So I'll tell CSS that, hey, CSS, come into the project tags container and grab the button elements that are there. Bring them into CSS so that we can set their background color to, let's pick a background color randomly. We can set the background color to 3D223C, and we can set their color property, which is the color of what will be written on the button. We can set that color property to D9, and we can also set the padding of the buttons to 0.5 rem for the top and the bottom, and then 1 rem for the left and the right. And I would also want us to set the border property or create a stroke, a border color on the button. And that's going to be 1px solid, then I would say 646464. And let's save this. Let's see what we have so far. You can see this is how the buttons are looking now. Now I would go for that to tell CSS, okay, I think this color is okay. Let's work with this. I would go for that to tell CSS that, okay, I would want you to please take out the outline property on these buttons. So set the outline to none, and please set the border radius to 1.5 rem. Now you can see that the buttons are now rounded, just like what we have here in Figma, right? And that's okay. So let's come here and let's say, okay, we are done with that. Since we are done with that, let's look for the next thing to design. Now the next element to design is going to be, okay, this element. Okay, it seems I did not give this element a class name. This container, it seems I did not give it a class name. So we are going to give this container a class name. Let's call it, since it's containing the links, the project link, right? The link to the project itself. Let's call that container, let's give it a class name called project link container. And as soon as we do that, let's grab the class name into CSS and let's style it. Let's style it here in CSS. Project link container, right? So the project link container would have its width set to fit content. Now this is the project link container here, right? This container, it's going to have its width set to fit content because we just want the width of this container to be the width of what is inside of it, right? We don't want it to be 100% wide. So I would set the width of that container to fit content, and I would set the height to auto. Now, when I set the height to auto, that's going to be very perfect. The next thing to do is to decide the direction in which the elements in this container will be arranged. As you can see, the elements in the container are arranged vertically by default, but the way we want them to be arranged is horizontally. So we want the elements in this container to be arranged on the row axis. And the way to tell CSS to do that for us is to activate Flexbox and set a flex direction to row, right? That's it. So after we set flex direction to row, of course, we need to justify content and set that to start. Then we need to align items and set that to center. And that's fine. Let's see what we have. Yes, we have the see full case study text link, and the icon arranged horizontally now. And we have a problem. The both of them are sticking to each other, right? We need to create a little space, a column gap space between this text link and the icon. So let's still stay here in the project link container that contains the both of them. Let's stay here and let's add a column gap. Right, let's add a column gap of 0.7 rem. Come here, and as you can see, yes, that space has been created. That's fine. That's fine. Now, the next thing to design will be the anchor tags, right? The anchor tags in the project link container. So let's ask CSS to go into the project link container and grab all the anchor tags there. And all we just want to do is to set the color of the anchor text or the anchor links. We want to set the color to something. Okay, let's pick a random orange or yellow color for that. So let's say we want to set the color to FFB 800. So FFB 800, right? Something like this. Let's see how it's going to look. And that's okay. We can work with this. So after that, we are going to say, okay, CSS, go into the project link container, grab all the paragraph elements there. In the project link container, we have one paragraph text there. So we are asking CSS to grab it and bring it into CSS so that we can style it by setting the font size to 0.8 rem. We don't want that text to be too big because already it's in all caps, right? So we don't want it to be too big. And looking like this is okay, but we have a problem. The text is not balanced with the icon. The icon looks too big than the text. The both of them are supposed to maintain harmony and balance. So what we are going to do is to reduce the font size of the icon. And it's interesting because our icons are from Font Awesome, right? And icons that come from Font Awesome are easily treated as text. So what we are going to do is to tell CSS to go to the project link container, go inside that container and grab all the I elements. The I elements are the elements that are used to place our icons from Font Awesome. So we are going to say go into that container, grab the I elements there, and set the font size of the icons, which are the I elements, or which is the I element. Set the font size of the icon to 0.8 rem, and that's fine. And as you can see, the icon is now of the same size as the text. So what we have here is the card. We have created a card. We have just created a card. Now, the only thing that's left for us to do is to duplicate this card into 3 other places so that we can have 4 cards in total. And let's do that. So to do this, we have to go to HTML. Take note. We have to go to HTML. This is where we have the project card. We all know how to do this here. So identify the opening div tag that represents the project card and go to the line number and click on that little drop down arrow there to collapse it. So this is the project card that we created, the one project card that we created. We are going to copy it and paste it in 3 places, in 3 additional places, so we can have 4 in total. So I have pasted the second, I have pasted the third, and I would paste the 4th. And here we have our 4 project cards. 1, 2, 3, and 4 project cards. Now I would save this. When I save this and I go back to my website, you would see that we have the 4 cards struggling to stay on a line. The 4 of them are struggling to stay on a single line, and that's not cool, right? That's not cool. And the reason why they are struggling to stay on a single line is because each of this card has its width set to 48%. And since the width of each card is 48%, it means that when you have one card stay beside one card, the both of them will occupy 96%. And they are occupying 96% width space in a space that is just 100% wide. So we can't have 3 cards that have 48% width each stay on the same line, because 48 plus 48 is 96. So that is 96 out of 100. So we can't add another 48. When we add another 48% wide card, it's going to cause all the cards to start shrinking too much. So we don't want that. There is a way we can avoid this. There is a way we can avoid this. The way to avoid this is very simple. All we just have to do is to go to the project container, right? We have to go to the project container. This is the project container here that is housing all the project cards. So we have to go to the project container and tell the project container that, hey, project container, when you have 2 cards that are 48% wide each, stay on a line. Do not allow another card that is 48% wide stay on the same line, because there will be no enough space for that card to stay there. The space that is available is 100% space. So if 2 cards that are 48% each stay on one line or stay in one line, it's going to take up 96% space, leaving just 4% space, and we can't afford another card that is 48% wide to squeeze itself into that remaining 4% space. So what we want that card, that additional card to do, we want that additional card that is trying to stay here to wrap itself to a new line. It should go and start its own line. It should go to a new line and start its own line of 100% width also, because this row is 100% wide. So the card should come here and start a new row that will be 100% wide, so that it can also have another space for another card. So that's what we want to tell this container to do. We want to tell this project container to ensure that a third card, which is 48% wide, will not stay here on the right because there is no space for it. So since there is no space, or if there is no space to occupy any element on the right here, that element should be pushed or should be wrapped to a new line, to a new row, to start its own journey. So what we are going to do is we are going to come here in CSS. We are going to go to project container. We are going to go to project container. And if you need more explanation to this, I'll be releasing a video soon that will explain this better. But of course, I explained this properly during our live classes, right? So we all understand this. So I would go to project container and I would set flex wrap to wrap. When I do that, you'd see what we have. You'd see that, yes, now that I have activated flex wrap, when this third container tries to squeeze itself into this space here, when there is actually no space for it, because this is 48 plus 48, 96. So this is also 48. So if you have 48 here on the right, that's way above 100. That's way above the space that is allocated for each of this row. So since this card is 48% and it's trying to squeeze itself here, since that is what it's trying to do, we are going to ask it to go to a new line and start its own row. So that is us asking it to wrap. So that's what the flex wrap property does. It helps us to wrap whatever element that is trying to stay here where there is no space for it. It will help us wrap that element to a new line. So here we have this. Now we have a little problem. You can see that the cards are sticking to themselves, right? They are aligning themselves towards the left, thereby sticking to themselves like this, no space between them. We can fix that, right? We can fix that by coming to the project container also that is housing all the cards and setting the justify content to space between. So what we want to do is we want to create the space between the cards in the project container. So if I come here, you'd see that, yes, a space has been created between them. Now we have another problem here. The space between the cards vertically is not enough. You can see full case study is almost going too close to this card beneath it. So we want to create adequate space also that will run through this line, right? We want to create adequate space that will run through this line horizontally like this. That space will make it possible that this card will not be too close to this card that is beneath it. So how do we create that space? We can create that space also on the project container using row gap. So we can set the row gap space to 2 rem, save that, come here, and you can see that, yes, there is enough space created between this card and this card, this card and this card. And here we have this project section done completely, right? You can see how easy it is to create this project section. Now, when you are building your own portfolio, you will definitely not have only one project listed in 4 places. You would always want to change the project title, the project description. You might also want to edit your roles, right? The roles that you played in the execution of the project. And the way to do that is very easy. Go to HTML, go to the HTML code that you copied and pasted. This is for the second card. You can come here and change this to, let's say, quick invoice. If I change that to quick invoice and I save this, you see that, yes, this is updated to quick invoice. Then, of course, you'd have a description for that project. You'd copy it and paste it here, right? Then for the links, of course, you'd come here and you'd change the link, the Behance link that you had there before. You change the Behance link to the Behance link for this new project that you are displaying. You change the Behance link here also to the Behance link of this new project that you are displaying. Just basic editing like that. Now, the only issue you might have with this particular pattern of building this project section is that you might find it hard to change the background image, right, for each of these projects, because as we all know, this background image was set directly from CSS, right? I set the background image here in CSS. So if I come here in CSS and I change the background image here, it's going to be changed across the whole cards, right? If I change the background image here, it's going to affect the whole cards. So how do I change the background image for, let's say, just quick invoice? The way I can do that is to go to the HTML code for this particular card, which is displaying quick invoice. I would come here. This is the card here that's displaying quick invoice. I would come here and I would go to that container that is displaying the background image. This is the container here. Now for this quick invoice project, I would add a combo class. I would add a new class name here, and I would call this quick image, right? I would call this quick image. Now, this is the class name that I will use to display a new background image for this container. So I won't use this class name anymore. Now you can choose to take out this class name or you can choose to leave it there, right? But what's more important is that I have a new class name now for this container that is meant to display my background image. And this is the new class name that I will use for the displaying of my background image. So I can come here, right, and put that new class name there. And of course, I would set the width to 100%, set the height to auto, set the padding still to 5 rem. Then I would set background image URL. Let's use my image. Let's have a different background image there. Then I would say background position. It's all going to be the same. The only thing that's changing here is just the image, right? That's just the only thing that's changing. So I would say background position, center, background size, cover, background repeat, background repeat, no repeat. Right, now you can choose to do this, or you can just choose to only change this. Let's just change only this, right? Since we are working with combo classes, let's just change only the background image property. Let's see what we have. Now you can see I have changed only the background image property. I just had quick image, right? That's the class name. I just only changed the background image, right, to my own image. And since this is a combo class, this particular container will still inherit the other properties from project image container, which is this. All of these other properties will be inherited and placed here, but it's just the background image only that will change. So this is how you do it for all the other cards that are displaying all the other projects. That's how you do it. So for this other project card, you would come here, you would expand it, and you change the project title to the project that you want to display there. Change the description, the project image container. You would come here, you would add a new class name and use that new class name to put a new background image, and so on and so forth. It's just the exact same thing, right? So we are going to then, let's come here, let's take out that background image for quick invoice. And here we have this. So the next part of this video will have us build the publication section and make the website to be mobile responsive. So in this part of the video, which is the final part of the video, we are going to write the CSS for the publication section, and also we are going to make the portfolio website to be responsive across different devices. So let's get started. Now for the publication section, which is this section here, the first element to design in this section will be the section itself, right? This section itself, the publication section itself. So if you come here, you would see that we have the publication section here, and it has a class name of publication section. So let's take that section into CSS using its class name. I'll copy the class name, come here, paste this, and of course we know that whenever you want to design a section, the first thing to do is to set the width of that section to 100% and set the height to auto. Now, what do we do to this section next? Like, what's the next thing to implement in this section? Let's go back to the section and let's see how this section is structured. You can see that inside this section, we have two children elements inside this section. This is the first child element in this section, and this is the second child element. These two containers are children elements in this section. And for the fact that we have two children elements in this section, we need to decide the direction in which these children elements will be arranged by, or will be arranged in, right? And looking at our design, these two children elements in the publication section are arranged vertically. So we need to go to this section in CSS and tell CSS that, hey, for this section here, the publication section, we want you to arrange the children in that section vertically. We want you to arrange them vertically. So I would come here to do that. Of course, we know what to do. I would activate Flexbox and I would set flex direction to column. And after I set flex direction to column, I would justify content, right, to start, and I would align items to start also. And one thing I would want us to do also, or to look at in this section, is this. Let's look at this section here. You'd see that the content in this section are actually touching the edges of the section. That's something we don't want to happen in our section, right? So the way to make that to not happen is to apply some padding space in the section so that there'll be space between the edges of the section and the content in the section, just the same way we have in these two sections here. So I would go to the publication section and I would apply padding in the publication section. So I would set the padding to, let's say, 2 rem for the top, 8 rem for the right, 4 rem for the bottom, and 8 rem for the left, just like that. Now when I come here, you'd see that yes, the publication section now looks better than it looked some moments ago. The content in this section are no more touching the edges of the section. So the next thing I would want us to do is to set a background color for this publication section. So let's come here, let's set a background color for the publication section. So let's set the background color to 180C15, which is the background color that we have been using for the other sections. And if you come here, you'd see that yes, that section has that background color, but we have a little problem here. And the problem is that almost all the text in this publication section are now unreadable. Like, we can't see them anymore because the text color is black and the background color is something close to black. So there is not enough contrast for us to see the text anymore. But we need to see the text while we are building. So one thing I would always do is to come here and set the color property to blue. Of course, we are going to change the color of the text from blue to the actual color that we need later. But let's just set this to blue so that we can see the text while we are building. And that's okay. So there we have that. And I would come here and I would want us to look at the sketch once again. Now let's look at the sketch of this section. Remember, we are still designing this section, right? So if you look at this section, if you look inside this section, you'd see that there is a space that should exist between this child and this child in this section. There is a space here that should exist, right? So that space should exist between my publications and Solar AI. So if you come here, you'd see that that space is not existing. Like there is not enough space here between the container that contains my publications and the container that contains Solar AI and all of this. There is not enough space there, but we need that space, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to come here to this section that we are designing and set a row gap space on this section that we are designing. Remember why we are setting a row gap space on this section. Setting a row gap space on this section is us simply telling the section that, hey section, create a row gap space between the elements that are inside of you. And what are the elements inside this section? This container and this container. These are the two children elements in this section. So setting a row gap space on this section is us telling the section to apply that row gap space between its children element. This is just like in Figma when you, like I've explained before now, when you create an auto layout and you put two elements in the auto layout, when you set the space between property, when you set the space between property to like a value of, let's say 20, what's going to happen is that it is the items in the auto layout that will have a space of 20 pixels existing between the both of them, right? That's how it is in Figma, right? And it's still the same way it is here in CSS. So I would still stay here on this section, or I would still stay with this section, and I would apply a row gap space of, let's say 1 rem. When I do that, you'd see that in the website now, there'll be a row gap space created between this container and this container. Now, this space is very cool. Now, what do we do next? Let's look at the next element to design. We are done with the publication section. So the next element here to design is this container called publication caption container. Let's take that container into CSS and let us first of all look at the container in our sketch. This is the container here. It contains the my publications text, right? So I would come here and I would say, okay, for that container, I just want that container to be 100% wide and I want the height to be auto. Reason is because in our sketch, the container is 100% wide. So I just want the width of the container to be 100% wide and I want the height to be auto. And that's that for that container. Now, the next element to design will be found out here. The next element to design will be the H1 element inside the publication caption container. So let's take this H1 element into CSS. So let's come here in CSS and let's tell CSS that, hey CSS, go into the publication caption container and grab that H1 element in the container there. Then bring it into CSS so that we can set the color of that H1 text to, let's set it to FF4 290. Then let's also set the font size to 1.1 rem, and let's also set the font weight of that text to 600, and let's set the letter spacing to 0.05 rem. So this is what CSS is going to do. So CSS is going to take all of these settings and apply it to the H1 text that is inside the publication caption container, which is this. So this is the H1 text here called my publications. If I go to my design, you'd see that yes, the my publications text is looking the exact same way, or the exact way we want it to look like. So what's the next thing to design? The next thing to design would be this container, obviously. Let's go to HTML and let's confirm that. So the next thing to design would be this container here called the publications container. So let's take that publications container into CSS. Now, what do we want to do with the publications container? Let's first of all come here and study the container. First things first, this container has to be as wide as the publication section. It has to be a 100% wide container. That's the first thing to do. Let's come here. Let's set the width of that container to 100% and let's set the height to auto. Now, you would notice so far that whenever I want to design a container, the first thing I mostly set for the container is the width and the height. That's because we need to define the sizes of our containers before we even start designing the position of the items in the container. We need to define the size first of all before we start thinking about how to arrange the elements in the container. So for this publications container, I have just set the width to 100% and I have set the height to auto. Now, looking at this container, what do we need to do next? We need to set the direction of the elements in this container. What are the elements? And when I say the elements in this container, I am referring to the children element. This container has two children elements, this card and this card. These are the two children elements in this container. So we need to set the direction in which these children elements will be arranged in the container. As you can see in our design, they are arranged horizontally from left to right. So we need to actually go to this container and tell the container that, hey, container, for your children, please arrange them horizontally. Arrange your children horizontally inside you, right? So let's go to that container, which is the publications container, and let's tell the container to do that. Now, the easiest way to tell a container to do that is to activate flexbox on the container, then set the flex direction to row. After that, you justify content to start. We can actually set this to space between later, but let's set this to start for now. We are going to change it later. And let's come here, let's set the align items to start. Right, and let's set I think align items to start is okay. All right, I think we should just leave this like this for now. If there is any change that will be added to this, we are going to see that later. And that's that with the publications container. So we have just designed this publications container. Now, the next thing to design, of course, will be the publication card, right? That's the card that showcases our publication, right? So let's look at that card here in this sketch. This is the card here. As you can see here, the card has two children, this and this. These are the two children of the card, or these are the two children in this card. So this and this, and they are arranged vertically. So first things first, before we tell the card to arrange its children vertically, let us define a width and a height for the card. So coming here, I would set the width of this card to 48% just because this card would need to take almost half of the width of its container so that another version of itself can stay here and take another half of the width of its parent container. So this is like me dividing the width of the parent container into two. Remember, the parent container's width is 100%. So I am trying to divide it into two equal halves, but I am using 48%, not 50%. Right? I am trying to reserve those little 2 percentages or the 4% so that we can use that for spacing and other things, right? So this is just me saying, okay, let this card be 48% in a space that is 100% wide so that I can have enough space to place another card right beside it. So I would set the width to 48% and I would set the height to auto. After that, I would set the display in this container to flex, or in this card to flex. Now, this is me trying to now set the direction of the children in this card. So I'll do that by setting the display to flex first of all. After that, I would set the flex direction to column, right? And after I set the flex direction to column, I would then justify content, set that to start, and I would set align items to start also. And you would see that this is beginning to make sense gradually, right? This is beginning to make sense gradually. Now, what I would want to do next is I would want us to look at the sketch and I would want us to remember this is what we are designing, the card, the publication card, right? I would want us to look at the two children in the publication card and you'd see that there is need for some space between the two children, this and this. There is need for the space between this child here that has all of these content and this child that has this link. There is need for some space there. There is no space here at all. So we need to create that space. And that space will be created with a row gap. So I'd set a row gap space of 1 rem, and I would want us to set a background color for that card. The background color will be something very close to what we have. It's going to be 181. Okay, let's go with 182. Or let's go 181. Let's say 216. The background color is going to be very close to what we have, right? Although it's present, but you can't really see it. It's present. Now, after that, I would want us to make that card, right, to have a border. Let's give it a stroke so that we can see it clearly. So I would set it to 1px solid, then 64. Save that, come here. And now you can see the card has that stroke around it. But as you can see here, the content of the card are touching the edges of the card, making it look very awkward, right? So of course, the next thing to do in a situation like this is to apply padding on the card so that there can be an inner space between the edges of the card and the content in the card. So I would come here, I would apply some padding on the card, and that padding is going to be 1.5 rem. Let's see how it looks. Okay, that's not bad at all. So this padding space is enough. Now, the next thing I would want us to do is to set a border radius. Let's set a border radius for the card of 1.5 rem. Let's see how it looks. Okay, not bad. All right, not bad. This is okay. So we can work with the card just like this, right? We can work with the card just like this. Now, we are done with designing the publication card. Remember, we set, sorry about that. Remember, we set the flex direction for this card to column, which means that the two children in this card will be arranged vertically, just the way they are arranged here. What are the two children in this card, or what are the two children elements? This container here containing this and this. This is one child of the card, and this is another child of the card. The both of them have been set to arrange themselves vertically, and do not forget that. So let's come here now. Let's look at the next element to design. The next element is this container here called publication title and description container. That's the next container to design. Now let us note that container in our design. This is the container here. It's called publication title and description container. This is the container that contains the publication title and the publication description. So we want to design this container. And of course, the first thing we want to set for the container is the width property. We want to ensure that this container is 100% as wide as the card container that it is in, right? So I would come here and I would set the width for that container to 100%, set the height to auto, and that's just fine. Now, after that, what do we want to do next to that container? We want to set the direction in which the children in this container will be arranged. As you can see, going by the design, the children elements in this container are arranged vertically. So we need to tell CSS that. And the way to do that is to activate Flexbox and then set flex direction to column. And after that, I would want us to justify content to start and align items to start. And that's it. Now, when I save this and I come back here, you'd see that, of course, there is no significant change here visually, but there are some changes in the background because we are actually writing CSS code to set some CSS rules, right? Now, let us look at this container. Remember, this is the container we are designing. It contains this container for Solar AI and the description. Now, this container here, understand, that contains these two children, needs to have a row gap space applied in it because we do not want the Solar AI title container to be too close to the description of the publication. We want some space between Solar AI and the description. As you can see, the both of them are too close here. So we want some little space here between Solar AI and this. So how do we do that? We are going to come here on this container and we are going to apply a row gap of 0.5 rem. Let's see how that looks. That's very okay, right? That row gap is very okay. And that's it. And we are going to move on to the next element. The next element to design will be this container that contains the publication title, right? So I would select that container, come in here in CSS, paste that container in CSS, or paste the class name of that container in CSS. And I would set the width to fit content, because we know for sure that such containers that just contain very brief and single-lined text, you most likely would want to set their width to fit content. So I would then set the height to auto also, and that's it. Then I would move on to the next element that I would like to design. The next element would be the Solar AI text, right? The heading 1 text that says Solar AI. So let's tell CSS to come in into that container and grab that. So I'll tell CSS, hey CSS, go into the publication title container. When you go there, grab the h1 text element in that container and then bring it here into CSS so that we can set its color to white and also set its font size to 1.2 rem and also set its font weight to 500. And CSS is going to do just that. And as you can see, we have this, right? Very, very easy. Now let's look at the next element to design in HTML. The next element to design is the publication description container. And of course, we know that that is the container that contains the description text of our publication. So I would bring that container with its class name into CSS, and I will set the width to fit content, then set the height to auto, and that's going to be it. Now, after that, what's going to be the next element to work on? The next element is going to be the paragraph element that contains the description text, the description content. So we need to design this paragraph element, right? So how do we do that? Let's take this paragraph element into CSS by telling CSS that, hey CSS, go inside this container, grab the paragraph element inside that container, bring it here into CSS so that we can set the color of that text to B2, 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 and also we can set the font size to 1.1 rem and then set the line height of that text to let's say line height to 1.5 rem, just like that. And CSS is going to do just that. And there we have that. Now, what's the next element to design using CSS? The next element to design is going to be this container here, which is called the publication link container. Now, let's identify that container in our sketch, right? This publication link container is this container here that contains this text link that just says read publication, right? So we need to work on this container. And of course, we know that containers like this will just have their width set to fit content and have their height set to auto. As simple as that, right? Now, if you look at that, what do we have to design next? We have to design the anchor element inside this container next, and it's very easy to design. So let's ask CSS to come and grab this anchor element inside this container. Let's come here. Let's say CSS, go into the publication link container, then grab the anchor element inside that container and then bring it here into CSS, just so that we can set the color of that to white, and that's all we just want to do, right? And if I go to my page, you'd see that yes, the read publication text link is having a white color now. So do not forget, right, that this is where you would come and paste the link of your publication that you are trying to display here. You take out the pound sign or the hash sign there and paste the link to your publication, and that's it. So as you can see here, so far we are done with the designing of the publication section. We are done with the building of the publication section. So what we can do next is to just duplicate this publication card and have it here on, or have another version of it here on the right. Let's do that. To do that, we are going to come here in HTML and ask ourselves, what are we trying to duplicate? We are trying to duplicate the publication card. So you'd identify the opening div tag of the publication card. You would come here, also take note of its number, click on the little drop down arrow there to collapse it, copy this and paste. And as you can see, we have the publication card. We have another publication card here. So we have two publication cards that are inside the publications container. And that's all. Now let's go back to our page and let's see what we have. You can see that we have the two publication cards staying horizontally side by side. But there is a little problem here. The little problem is the fact that the both of them are leaning towards the left, like they are sticking to themselves and leaning towards the left side of the page. Now, we don't want that to happen like that. So what we are going to do is we are going to move on to the publications container, which is this. This is the container that directly contains the two publications card. So we are going to go to that container and set space between on that container. By setting space between on that container, we are telling the container that, hey container, create a space between the two children that are inside of you. Right? Create a space between your two children. So we are going to go to that container. It's called, I think, publications container. Yes, it's called publications container. We are going to come here and we are going to set, let's set the justify content here to space between. And one thing I would want us to also set here would be the flex wrap property, right? I would want us to also set a flex wrap property on this container so that in case you want to have more than two publications, right, you can put your third and fourth publication and it's going to wrap. The third publication that you want to display will wrap to a new line in a very comfortable way, right? So for that reason, I would come here, I would say flex wrap set to wrap, and that's it. And that's going to be just fine. Now we have our portfolio website fully ready, right? Everything has been built just the way we want it to be built. So the next thing we are going to work on is the responsiveness of our website across different devices. So we are going to see how responsive this website will be across different devices. So let's come here. Let's reduce the size of our browser and let's see the behavior of the element. As you can see, the website is not looking good when the device gets smaller. And that's because we have not configured the element in our website to adapt properly as the size of the screen gets smaller. Now, this is one rule you should always keep in mind when it comes to designing your website for different devices. You should always know that the smaller the device, the more you get to manage space. The smaller the device, the less space you should give off. The bigger the device, the more space you can give off. As you can see in our case here, we are in our laptop view, and the laptop, my laptop device or our laptop devices are wide enough, right? So on our laptop devices, we can afford to give off this padding space here. This space is empty. As you can see, there is nothing in it, right? We can afford to give off this padding space here and this padding space here. We can afford to make it even bigger than this, and it's still going to be fine. It's going to be fine because on this particular device, there is space for that. But when the device starts to get smaller, let's say to a tablet size or to a mobile phone size, you realize that there is not enough space for you to start giving off too much of space like this on your page. So one rule you should always keep in mind is the smaller the screen size gets, the more you have to manage space and the less you have to give off space. So that's one thing we are going to look at. So we are going to first of all see how to reduce the padding space that we have here in our sections on the left and on the right. We are going to see how to reduce them as the screen gets smaller. So when we get to a certain breakpoint, we are going to reduce the padding space inside this section so that we can manage our space properly. And let's do that. So of course, we are going to use media query to make our website responsive, and we all know how to do that. Now, if you are a student of our UI UX design bootcamp, this is not going to be news to you, right? And if you are not a student of our UI UX design bootcamp and you're watching this, then it means you should enroll in one of our UI UX design bootcamps to learn all of this from scratch. So we are going to look at media, screen, and I would say max width. And I would want to target devices that their width is not wider than 1200 pixels. So any device that their width falls below 1200 pixels, I want to create a new version of my website for those devices inside this curly bracket. So I would stay inside this curly bracket to create a new version of my website for those devices. So what do we want? What's the one thing we want to do when our website is being viewed on these type of devices that their width is below 1200 px? What do we want to do? First things first, I would want to reduce the padding in all of these sections, from the hero section to the project section and to the publication section. I would want to reduce these padding spaces inside them on the left and on the right. So first of all, let's bring in the hero section. Go to the hero section that you have designed. Remember, what we designed first is for desktop, right? Or what we build first with CSS is for desktop. So I would come here, I would take the hero section styling block into this new device styling block, which is for devices with their width below 1200. So I would say when our website is being viewed on any device that their width is below 1200 px, I would want the right margin to not be 8 pixels anymore. I would want the right margin to be 5, not 8 pixels, 8 rem. Now I would want the width of this website, or I would want the padding rather. I would want the padding on the right side in this section to be 5 rem, and I would want the padding on the left to be 5 rem. So that's me reducing the padding on the left and on the right to 5 rem in the hero section when the website is being viewed on a device that the width is not more than 1200. So if I come here now and I try to reduce the size of my screen, watch what's going to happen to this padding space. When the size of the screen gets smaller to a certain point, you see that the padding space here will be reduced from 8 rem to 5 rem. Watch that. As you can see, it's been reduced, right? The size of the padding will be reduced, and that's very important. That's us managing space, right? That's us managing space. Now, let's look at one thing I would want us to design or to change about our hero section when the device is smaller. So when our device is smaller, let's say our device is a tablet device, I would want this text, right, to not be this packed. You can see the text, this description text here is now too packed. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. That's too much of lines, right? When there is enough space here. So what I would want to do is when the size of the device gets smaller, I would want the container that is containing this text to increase its width to maybe somewhere here, so that the text in the container can also see enough chance to increase itself and spread across the whole screen. That's going to make it look better, right? So we are going to look for the container containing this text, and we are going to increase the width of the container. Remember, we initially set the width of the container containing this text to 50%, but that's on desktop devices. We don't want that for tablet devices, right? We want a situation whereby when the website is being viewed on a smaller device, like a tablet device, let the container containing this text increase its width to, let's say, 70% or 80%, so that the text in it can also increase its own width. So let's come here. let's trace that container containing that text. That container is called the hero description container. You can see we set the width to 50%. So I'll take the container, I would copy it. Take note, I'm copying this. I would copy that. I would come here in the styling block of media query. I would paste it and I would say that, okay, when my website is being viewed on any device that its width is below 1200 px, I would want the width of this hero description container to be 80%. So that when it is 80%, it will become wider and the text in it will see enough room to spread itself to become wider also. Let's see that. So you can see when I reduce the width of my screen and I get to a certain point, you can see the container is wider and the text itself has now seen enough space to expand. So this looks better on a tablet device than having all the text just packed in one corner like this. This looks better, right? So you can see that so far we are able to manage space in our website. We are able to manage the padding space here when the device gets smaller, and we are able to increase the container space for this text when the device gets smaller in our own way, right? Now we are going to move further to look at what we want to design next. Now, the next thing we want to design would be the projects section. Remember, for all these sections, we need to reduce their padding, right? We need to reduce the left and the right padding from 8 rem to, let's say, 4 rem, right? Or 5 rem first. So I would come here. Let's take the project section. Copy the CSS of the project section in desktop mode. Then come here in this media query block. And I'll say, okay, for devices that their width is not above 1200 px, I would want the right padding of this project section to be 5 rem. And I would want the left padding to be 5 rem. Let's test that and let's see. Now you can see it's working. Let's increase the width first of all. Now let's start to reduce it. You'll see that we will get to a particular point where this padding here will reduce and this padding here will reduce, thereby giving these cards enough space to spread. All right, you can see that happened, right? And that's cool, actually. That's cool. So what are we going to do next? We are going to say, okay, let us reduce the left and right padding for the publication section, or in the publication section. Let's reduce that to 5 rem also when the device gets smaller. So let's look for the publication section. This is the publication section here. Let's come here. Let's say, okay, when we are viewing this website in a smaller device, when the device gets smaller and the width of the device is below 1200, let's reduce the right padding to 5 rem and the left padding to 5 rem. Now let's test that and let's see what was going to happen. You can see that the padding here on the left and on the right reduced at some point, right? And that's cool. So we have seen how to optimize our websites for tablet devices. Basically, that's what we have just seen how to do, right? There is nothing that we really need to change here other than this, right? The website will look better like this on a tablet or an iPad device. It's going to look okay like this. Now, what we need to optimize the website for next is to ensure that the website looks good on mobile devices. So for that, we are going to come here and create another media query block that will target mobile devices that are in landscape mode and mobile devices that are in portrait mode. So I would just come here. I would say at media screen and I would say, now let us create a new version of this website. Let us create a new version of this website that will be displayed in devices that their width is not wider than 768px. Now we are going to stay inside the styling block here to create the version of that website. And what do we do next? We want a situation whereby when our website is viewed on a very small device like a mobile device, we want to manage this padding space further. This padding space is now looking too much if this is to be used on a mobile device. Mobile devices are not that wide, so we can't throw away this large padding space. So we are going to reduce the padding spaces in all the sections also when the website will be viewed on mobile devices. So we are going to come here and we are going to say for this website, when this website is being viewed on any device that its width is lower than 768px, the padding space for the hero section, let's copy the hero section code here. The padding space for the hero section will be reduced. So let's say in this case, we want the padding space to be 1 rem on the right, to be 3 rem at the top, to be 3 rem at the bottom, and to be 1 rem on the left, just like this. So if I come here now, you'd see that when I reduce the size of the screen, I would want you to take a good look at the hero section. See what's going to happen. Now you can see when I get to a very small size, you can see that the padding space in the hero section on the left and on the right has been reduced. Now this is a 1 rem padding space, which is something we can work with in mobile phones, right? Just like this. So let's reduce the padding for the card section or for the project section also. So I would come here, I would say, okay, now before we do that, I think there is one element we designed first, which is the hero description container. All right. So when our website is being viewed on a mobile phone, we want that hero description container to increase its width to 90%. It's going to help the text in that container to spread further also to somewhere here so that the users can read comfortably, just like this. Now you can see the text looks better, like it's spreading very well, and this looks better if somebody has to read it than you having it packed in one corner and looking very clumsy, right? This looks better. So we are going to work with this. And the next thing I would want us to work on would be the project section. Let's come here. Let's reduce the padding also of the project section. Let's reduce the right padding of the project section to 1 rem. Let's reduce the left padding to 1 rem. Then for the bottom padding of the project section, let's reduce it to 2 rem. Remember, we are working with mobile phones now, right? And there is not enough space in those devices for us to really start throwing out spaces here and there. So we are going to manage our space the best way we can. So I would save that. When I come here now and I try to reduce, or when I reduce the size of my screen, you would see that in the project section, the padding spaces have been reduced. And this is better. It's better this way, right? Now you can see managing the padding space like this is actually better. All right. So let's keep designing. Let's come here. Let's work on the publication section. We need to reduce the padding space in the publication section also to 1 rem on the left and on the right so that we don't throw out too much space in that section on mobile devices. So I would come here. I would set the horizontal, or I would set the right padding to 1 rem. I would set the left padding to 1 rem, and the top padding will be 2 and the bottom padding will be 4. Now if I come here and I reduce the size of my screen, you would see that yes, that's going to be effective. As you can see, we have a very solid padding space here on the left and on the right. This padding space can actually work well on mobile screens, right? right? They can work well on mobile screens. So there is one more thing, or there are two more things I would want us to implement in mobile view. And the things I would want us to implement in mobile view are this. I would want us to ensure that the cards that are displaying our project are stacked vertically on top of another. So I would want this card, for example, I would want this card to occupy this whole width, the whole width when it's in a mobile device. I would want one card to occupy the whole width, the whole row space, the whole width space when it's a mobile device, or when it's being viewed in a mobile device. Now, if one project card occupies the whole space in front of it when it's in mobile, when it's being viewed in a mobile device, that's going to push this other card to stay under it, and that's going to push this one to stay under, push this one to stay under. So if the width of one project card is no more 48%, if the width of one project card is now 100% in mobile view, what's going to happen is that when this website is being viewed on a mobile device, each project card will be occupying the whole width space of that mobile device. Each project card will occupy the whole space here, now making sure that there will be no space for another card to stay beside it, just like how we have this thing beside it. The reason we have this and this here is because this is still 48% and this is still 48%. So the both of them are trying their best to share the 100% width space that their parent container has. But if I change this in mobile view and I say, let each of these cards have 100% width, it means that in mobile view, each of these cards will occupy the whole width space, now making sure that no card will stay beside it. Each card will stay on its own line, or will stay in its own row. Each card will go to a new line and occupy 100% width space in its own row. That's going to ensure that all the cards will now stack on top of themselves one by one. Right? That's what's going to happen. So we explained this also during our live classes. So we are going to implement that now. So let's come here. Let's go to the media query where we are designing the version of this website for mobile phones. Let's come here. Let's stay in here. And let's say, okay, for the project card, let's bring in the project card. Let's bring in the project card. So let's say the project card, yeah, we'll have to change the way it's designed. So I would say, okay, I'll take the project card into the media query for the mobile version of our website. I'll say, okay, when this website is being viewed on a mobile device, let the width of the project card be 100%. So all the project cards will now have a width of 100% on their own. Each of them will have a width of 100%. So when I squeeze my screen size to mobile view, you can see that each of the card in mobile view will now have a width of 100%. They will now be occupying the whole screen, the whole width of the screen, right? And when one occupies the whole width of the screen, it automatically pushes the next to the new line, or it wraps the next container to a new line, so that that can come here and occupy the whole width of its own screen also. Then the next project card will be pushed to a new line to go and occupy its own 100%. So there will be no space for two cards now to stay in one line or on one line to share that line. There will be no space for two cards to stay on one line to share that line, right? So each card will now take 100% width space, right? Pushing the next to a new line to take its own 100% width space, just like that. So this is very easy. As you can see, this looks better in mobile view. This looks better as a mobile view. Now, what are we going to do next? We are going to need the My Publications. We are going to need the My Publications cards also to be arranged vertically, just like this. And it's still the exact same thing that we are going to do. So we are going to come here, grab the publications card, This is it here. And all we just want to do is to set the width. We want to say that in mobile view, let the width of the publication card be 100%. Let the width of the publication card be 100%, just like that. I would save that, come here, and if I squeeze the screen, squeeze the size of my screen, you'd see that, yes, we now have this looking like this. So the two publications are now stacked vertically, or we can say the two publication cards are now stacked vertically. But there is a problem here. We need some row space between these two publication cards. We need some row space between these two publication cards. So where do we apply that row space? To know where you'd apply the row space, just find out the element that is containing the two publication cards. This is the element containing the two publication cards, right? This is called the publications container, or the publication container. We can go to the publication container now. Right, let's go to the publication container. When we get there, publications container. So when we get to the publications container, we can say, okay, let's set a row gap of 1.5 rem, just like that. And when we go back to our website and we view this in mobile view, you'd see that that row gap of 1.5 rem will be applied in mobile view, just like this. So you can see that we have been able to create our portfolio website, and we have been able to make it responsive across different devices. So I can use the device, the toggle device toolbar here in the Chrome DevTools to actually switch this between different devices, so you can see how it actually looks in actual devices. So this is how the website will look like in an iPhone 12 Pro. This is how it's going to look like in an iPhone 14 Pro Max, right? And this is how it's going to look like in a Samsung Galaxy. This is how it's going to look like in an iPad Pro, right? This is how it's going to look like in an iPad Mini. This is how it's going to look like in an iPad Air. This is how it's going to look like in a Surface Duo. This is how it's going to look like in a Nest Hub. And this is how it's going to look like in a Nest Hub Max. Just like this. Right? This is how it's going to look like in a Nest Hub Max. And you can see that across all devices, the portfolio website looks very good, right? It looks very good. Now, before we call it a day, right? Before we call it a day, I would like to say that the way you will deploy this portfolio website to Netlify will be described in a video that I'll link in the description of this particular video, right? When you are done building the website, you'd have to deploy the website to Netlify or to Vessel, right? One of these free platforms that you can use to deploy your portfolio website. And it's just very easy. It's not technical. It's drag and drop. You just take a folder, dump it in one container, and everything is done, right? So as you can see, this is the platform where you would come to deploy this website for free, so that you can generate a link and start sharing it to potential employers, right? So the most important thing here is that you have your website, or you have your portfolio website developed. Now you can come here and then deploy it so that it can be viewed by anyone around the world, right? It can be viewed by anyone around the world. Now, that's something that you would get to do after you are done with the building of your website. And please make sure you make your website to be mobile responsive. Make sure it is responsive, because most people who are going to view your website will be viewing it from a mobile device. So make sure it is very responsive, right? Now, one last thing I would like to talk about before we call it a day is this. I would like to go over these points. Now, these points are some points I would want you to keep in mind when you are trying to create your portfolio website, especially as a UI UX designer that's starting out. Now, your portfolio website must be simple enough for a non-designer and straightforward enough for a designer. Basically, you should create a portfolio website that goes straight to the point. There are lots of portfolio links sent to anyone who is trying to hire, right? So your portfolio website should be able to go straight to the point, showcase what you have been able to do, so that whoever wants to hire can use that to know what you can do. It's as simple as that. You are just trying to showcase what you have done. That's the essence of having a portfolio website, to showcase what you have done. Every other thing is secondary, right? Now, use one call to action all through, which is send me an email in this case. Now, when you have your portfolio website, it's not going to be very, very cool for you to present your viewers with too many decisions to make, right? You don't want to present them with too many decisions to make. You want to just present them with what you have done, and then have them make one decision to reach out to you. Now, reaching out to you should not be very, very here and there. It should be just straightforward. They should send you an email. So we have seen how to make this button active, whereby if anybody clicks on it, it's going to launch the email app on their device so that they can send you an email. So use one call to action so that you make reaching out to you as easy as possible. Now, try to control bias by controlling the content your users see instantly on your portfolio website. Now, this is a very important point. When you are describing yourself here, avoid personal information. Avoid any information that's not related to what you are trying to showcase here. Right? Do not tell anybody the university you went to, how long you went to university, how long you've been looking for a job. Don't share information that's not relevant to what you are trying to showcase. What you have here should be like a backing point to what you are showcasing, right? So avoid information that can generate bias towards you. Right? There is no need for you to come here and start talking about your favorite food, your favorite color, or maybe you talk about things that are very, very sensitive, right? There is no point for you to do that, right? Just focus on why you are creating your portfolio website. Focus on what you can do based on what you are showcasing here. Now, number 4, make sure it's a one-page portfolio, especially if you are just a UI UX designer starting out. Now, if you have a multi-page portfolio, trust me, except you have a name out there, nobody would easily want to navigate the whole pages of your portfolio if they are actually going through other portfolios. Right? Nobody would have the patience to navigate the whole page of your website, especially if they are going through other portfolio websites. So you want to make it a one-page portfolio website where you just showcase your best jobs. Make it very straightforward. Pick out your 4 best jobs and display them. Pick out your best publications and display them. Then talk about yourself here. All you are trying to achieve with your portfolio website is that you are trying to showcase your strength. You are trying to showcase what you have done so that those information can be used to know what you can do. So please focus on that. The main purpose of a portfolio website is to showcase what you have done. That's the main purpose. Every other thing is secondary. Now, number 5, don't spell out your location. This is another very important information. Now, this is something I see in some portfolio websites where people say, I am a UI UX designer based in. I'm a UI UX designer based in. Now, that's you already throwing in bias that's not necessary from the beginning. You are trying to generate bias that's not necessary from the beginning. Like I have said, the reason your portfolio website exists is to showcase what you have done. And where you stay is not what you have done. Your location is not what you have done. Right? There is no point talking about your location in your portfolio website. There is no point talking about it. Focus on showcasing what you have done. Right? So don't spell out your location. Let your users see what you can do before they know where you are. Let whoever is going through your portfolio website be wowed by what you have done. Let them be impressed by what you have done. Let them know what you can do before they even know where you are. This is because sometimes where you are might not really be a problem if they see that you can really do what they want you to do. Where you are might not be a problem anymore, right? But the moment you put your location first, you might discourage many people to look further. They might just see your location and be like, okay, let me look for someone in Europe. Okay, let me look for someone in Canada. Okay, let me look for someone in, that might just disqualify you first without you actually showing what you can do. So please do not include your location in your portfolio website. Just go ahead and showcase what you have done. Focus on showcasing what you have done. Focus on that. So that's going to be that for this video. And thank you all for watching, and thank you all for staying till the end. I'll be looking forward to your portfolio website, and I hope we all have the best out of this.